Welcome to episode 70 of the Critical Fools podcast. This week we'll be reviewing and discussing a 1967 film titled Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, directed by Stanley Kramer. Stars Spency Tracy, Sidney Pontier, I think that's how you pronounce it, Katharine Hepburn, and Catherine Houghton. I didn't actually look up all the pronunciations. Houghton, yeah. This film is, I'm going to ask for your thoughts, but just for some backdrop, this film surrounds itself around a critical plot point of an interracial proposal, not marriage yet. Takes place in 1960 San Francisco Bay Area, I'm curious. I guess when you saw the title, did you know anything about this film in general? I'm also curious about if you did, what did you know? If you didn't know, what did you? Because based on the title, obviously you see where that title plays a part in the movie, it's said over and over again in the film. But I'm just curious, going in, when your impressions, what were your impressions, and then coming out, did those change, or were you pleasantly surprised?
Honestly, I didn't know anything about this movie. I hadn't heard about it before, and other than it was a film from the 60s. And it's definitely, it's interesting and we've talked about this a lot when we review different movies from the past. It's just the pacing and the way things are filmed is so much different. And I noticed, I will say, I picked up a key difference in certain scenes when there would be an elongated pause of one of the characters, and then there'd be kind of more soothing music played in the background. I was like, wow, we never film a shot like that anymore, right? It was just totally stylistically different. But that being said, obviously the content was, some things are very timeless today, and then some things are definitely more of a period piece. I don't think people question, right, interracial relationships anymore. But at that point in time, in the 60s, in the height of the civil rights, it was obviously very contentious. I think around that time, there were 17 states who still had that as illegal on the books, right? And they even bring that up in the point with the film as one of their contentions. I think one of the dads raises that as you need to consider that it's not smart of you, because you two may love each other, but society is just not going to accept that, was I think one of their points. And so it was interesting. It's definitely it gives you a glimpse as to what society was at that point.
No, I agree. I will still say that, unfortunately, even though there's been progress on mixed marriages, I think you can still find a lot of people who are who disagree on the matter.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're it's 100% accepted, right, amongst everybody, but we've definitely made a lot of progress where you don't really have laws in the books, things like that. Obviously, there's some people who still raise objections, and I've definitely met people who they want their kids to, regardless of race, to marry within their own culture. I've heard that quite a bit.
Yeah, I thought that was something that we'll talk about, but that was something that I appreciated of this film, because it's not talked about enough. I think right now in our mainstream current culture, it's always talked about a specific lens of what mixed marriage looks like, but also I'm getting the actor. I have the actor's name in my head and not the main character.
Sydney, or which one?
So it's Dr. John, right? John, yeah.
Yeah, John.
His parents also are they would rather he married within their subculture. So I think that's also something we could discuss. But before we get into that, the backdrop is obviously an area that well. And I'm curious what you thought, before we get into all the critical topics. I'm curious to what you thought of that opening scene, or the highway, the critical highway scene.
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who still aren't aware, even though we probably alluded to or either talked about our hometown, we both grew up in San Jose, California, so that's part of the South Bay Area. And so it made me chuckle, because obviously I knew exactly when you have a shot. All right, for context, when you're leaving or flying into San Francisco, you can make basically a left on one of the main highways there and go towards our hometown, San Jose, and right towards San Francisco because it's much closer to San Francisco. I was more shocked because right now a lot of people don't realize our hometown's, I think, the 10th largest metro, something like that, which is about 1.1. It's larger than San Francisco. But at the point in time when this film was made, San Jose was nothing more than just a little farming town. So I was shocked they even had it on the sign at that point in time. That actually did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's probably just because of its location, right? Like it is like at the time, right? It's the southern tip of what we consider the Bay. So it's like probably still a marking point of like if you want to go south, right? You just go south to San Jose, right? They wouldn't put like another city like Gilroy or something like that.
No. I don't know if you've ever heard the song "Do You Know the Way to San Jose," but it's because I forgot what the singer's name was. He actually saw the sign going towards San Jose. I think it might have been that sign, and like literally wrote a song about that.
Nice.
About our hometown, yeah. So that's kind of what we're famous for back in the day.
Okay. Besides that little sneak away, I'm curious to like, you know, they do shoot some scenes, like obviously some aerial shots, but also they have some scenes where they're in the city.
I will say also, we've both been to San Francisco many times. It's about an hour away from where we grew up. San Francisco has definitely changed from the 1960s till now. I was like, yeah. I've never seen the city that clean.
No, that's why like I don't want to take too much time, but like one thing that crossed my mind rewatching this film after like so many years is like obviously the city has changed stylistically, and you know, maybe you want to speak to it, but I think most people understand the tech boom. But what I was fascinated by was like how even back then there was a perception of San Francisco as like a very progressive city, and that hasn't really changed in some ways, but how that it's evolved has not been for the best, I think, and unfortunately, in a lot of circumstances. And yeah, I'm just curious to like, you know, was it weird seeing like that kind of San Francisco and how it's evolved? I'm going to say evolved because some people say it's evolved for the better, others say for the worse. But
no, it doesn't surprise me because you got to take into account like a little bit of history or U.S. history. So this film was made around '67. That was around the start of the hippie movement. So before then, like if we're talking about progressiveness, San Francisco is like by today's standards would probably be like extremely conservative, like, and during the point in time when this movie was made. It wasn't until around this time or a little bit thereafter that the hippie movement started to take place. San Francisco was one of the birthplaces of the hippie movement around like Haight-Ashbury, certain neighborhoods that really became sort of congregating centers. And if you go there, you can still see some of the remnants of the hippie movement there today. And if you go across to the East Bay towards like Berkeley and some of those areas, there were also big areas for the hippie movement, right? And so like I'm not surprised that San Francisco is much different because a lot of these significant kind of cultural movements hadn't quite yet taken place and rooted themselves in the city.
Yeah. I'll just table it with saying that like it's just crazy how like it's, if you think about it, it's really maybe a generation and a half since this movie came out, and like how the city has evolved in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave my opinion aside around if it's for the better or for the worse, but I thought it was interesting seeing through film, like a different era of the city, and I think of the Bay Area in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, I mean the technology was in its infancy at that point, so it hadn't really affected the economy there.
I mean, perfect segue to maybe how getting into the film. Actually, there's that scene where they still used because I remember this as a kid. Like my parents still had like the
dial phone.
Yeah, the wheel. But what's interesting too is that this was long gone by the time we were even born. Was the I want to make a call to like a different city. What's the cost? Like an hour, and then he pays. He obviously the
like
cost
$220.
Yeah, it can be charged to the household. So he leaves the money in the jar. I don't know if it was a jar, but like in the desk. And I was like, wow, that's like
it's like a different era, man.
Different era, But anyways, getting to the film.
Hold on, before you go, I will say something that was kind of foreshadowing that I thought that was interesting is actually at the beginning of the film when they were in the art gallery, right? and they're like looking at one of the pieces, and the doctor's a little confused, and she's like, "Oh, it's like a kinetic piece, or like kinetic energy piece," and he's like, "What do you mean?" And he turns it on, and it starts moving. They kind of alluding to the fact it was kind of interesting because I think it kind of foreshadowed the fact that San Francisco would be kind of a revolutionary center of technology moving forward from that point in time. It's funny because I don't think they were trying to show that, but it really, because San Francisco, the Bay Area, is a big sort of tech and technology hub today. And so it was interesting. I was like, wow, they kind of unknowingly foreshadowed what would come of that area.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the director himself and the writer, but to your point, if you look at the time period, right, Fairchild Semiconductors is late 50s, Intel is spinning up,
IBM,
IBM as well. So like it is the infancy of what we consider now looking back, right, like the first tech boom, right, before the next one, which was the 80s with Microsoft and Apple. And then in the that leaked into the 90s. And then we had let's call it the Internet 2.0 boom, which is the one that most people here know, Google, Facebook,
Twitter. No, bro, Meta.
Meta, whatever. Yeah, Meta. But then Facebook. And now we're in this other era. But yeah, I think it's like, to your point, like it's an interesting, either unintentional, maybe it was intentional, but I think you're right.
I think it was unintentional, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. But anyway, go ahead.
Nobody could, if you read a lot of like mainstream media back then in the 60s, nobody could imagine.
No one saw it coming, dude.
Yeah.
And so like to your point, like saying, or like more to that point is that our hometown San Jose was something like 40,000 people in that at that point in time, 40 to 50. Now it's like 1.2 million. No one could have seen that boom coming.
Yeah. But anyways, now going to the mechanics of the film, right? So this film starts with a young couple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an age difference. We can talk about that, but let's just say
14-year age difference.
Yeah. We'll get into that maybe after I have that set up. But a couple, I'll say a couple. A couple is going to visit I guess to be or wants to be bride is her family. Mm-hmm. So and they live in San Francisco, which is why it takes place in San Francisco. Her father, this is the main character, Joan, or Joe. There's a nickname they give her, right?
Joey,
yeah. Which is interesting because it's like you would consider that a boy's name now, Joey, but and her father is an esteemed I guess he runs a paper, but he runs a paper now, but he started his career as a journalist, I think, as a writer. Mm-hmm. And then her mother is like a art gallery curator, right? Yeah. So they come from this like affluence, and it's later explained to us that John's family is from not just different ethnicity, but also socioeconomics. His dad was a mailman.
Yeah, he did well, but it's just a totally different background.
Yeah, and I forgot what his mother did. She might have been stay
home.
Yeah,
is my guess.
So yeah, they're and the create the I'm gonna call it like this movie felt like a play, right? To create the play like
elements,
not elements, but like that, let's say the plot
structure,
plot device to push the plot forward. They create this really tight time crunch, right? Because they're going there because she wants to get married, or they want to get married, but they want their blessing because they're an interracial couple, and they want to get married basically in they just met too, like 2 weeks ago in Hawaii.
No, 10 days.
10 days ago in Hawaii.
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days in Hawaii, and now they want to get married like the next week. And this obviously evolves, but this is the backdrop. Yeah,
which like I understand the topic of this film, and it was probably very much in the societal eye at that point. The idea of interrelational relationships, but it made me laugh because they painted the most absolutely extreme scenario, and that like the least concerning, like when I was watching this, obviously because I don't care, was the fact that he's black and she's white. It was more that they met 10 days. There's a 14-year age difference, and they wanted their everyone's permission and to be on board within the span of 8 hours. I was like, this is an insane set of scenario they drew up.
Yeah, so I'm actually curious. Like, what's your thoughts on before we even get to the race thing? Because I know you say you don't care, but I know there's a lot of implications to all those things. But what about the age difference? That isn't really highlighted upon actually in this film, by the way. Which
Right.
is
It might not have been as big a deal back then. I'm not sure what it was like in the 60s. Yeah, I would say more. It's tougher to relate when you have that big of an age difference, which is where I sort of started drawing some more red flags with everything else about the dynamic between the couple was a little more red flaggy, right? The shortened time period, how quickly they're moving, things like that.
yeah. But anyways, go back to the age difference. What's your thoughts on that front?
I mean, well, what do you mean? I think I think on top of all the other challenges they're going to have, that's just another thing that's going to be a big challenge.
I guess I'll start with what's your personal philosophy around that topic then.
Would I engage in a 14-year age difference?
If you're but
I think it's
like, or your kids or whatever. Yeah.
I just think it's harder to relate to another person when there's a gap. Like references things, like even references with people that are 6 years younger or older, right? It's different because how you grew up or the things that you relate to and were exposed to is just different. So personally, for me, I wouldn't necessarily be drawn towards that large of a dynamic, but if it works for other people, so be it.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts? You seem very interested in this.
No, I'll just say this. My personal philosophy, which is I have a little caveat to it because I have an exclusion rule, but I do believe for the most part, I think it, like you said, it makes sense. Like you said, for the chemistry and for the dynamic, when it's like if you do the half your age plus 7 rule.
It's a big cliche, but okay.
It's a cliche. The only exception I have is that sometimes, like in life,
but bro, that hold on, half your age plus 7 could still be, if you're 40, that could be 27, which is about that. So if they're a couple years older, you're like, that's fine.
Wait, what?
All right, so apply that if he was 40. That would be 27. Is you're saying that's an okay cutoff.
But her brain is mature, so.
Oh, okay. This is why, like with like rules like that, I was like, it gets to be a little dicey, and I don't think people fully think that through.
All I know is that when there was the birth of modern civilization, so let's count from the Romans to now, you find a lot of cases where like there are significant age gaps, and I think that is partly due to time, old, archetypes of power. And
bro, do you really want to bring up Roman and Greek times as your example? They were engaging in a lot of other nefarious activity. I don't think you would.
Yeah, but I mean, now that I don't want to go full throttle on this topic, but now that like society is evolving, where we're more open to like some of those other old dynamics.
You know what they were doing to young boys back then. Yeah, it was not the best behavior. So I don't know if that's your best model.
But you could even go to like 19th century, where like you have older aristocrats, we'll call them aristocrats, who marry younger people.
But there's also totally different because a lot of them, in certain cultures they even had multiple wives, right, or mistresses. I don't know if that's necessarily your best. I don't know where we're going with this.
I'm just gonna wrap up with saying like this archetype seems to. I do agree with you that like I think, for the most part, there's a lot more pitfalls than benefits. I'll say that. But I'm just saying like this dynamic it just changes. It seems like because I read a story the other week where this guy that was 50, he's suing his ex-girlfriend who was an OnlyFans model, because like he gave her all these gifts and then she dumped him, and then she basically had like $500,000 worth of gifts.
So he gave her the gifts, and then
obviously she's gonna win, but like she's like 20, around our age, like 28, and he's like 50. Like like what you think was going to happen there. She was attracted to a certain thing until she wasn't, and then he was attracted. Obviously, you know what? You're a dude, you get it. But what I mean is that like it seems like this kind of cycle, even though these characters seem more genuine than these bad examples, but it seems like this is a time as true cycle.
Okay, so I do know a couple people who have that significant age difference, but that's not the norm. Even today, I don't think it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean the norm.
I think most people. My whole point is, I think most people realize the significant challenges and hurdles that come with like too large of an age gap. And I don't know exactly what your threshold is, but I think that just, especially within their relationship, that just even poses more problems or challenges.
Yeah, I think it's just I wanted to bring it up because I found it interesting that the film didn't highlight that at all. Actually, if you think about it. And I found that interesting because, to your point, because the family, her family, was really focused on the challenges they're going to face moving forward, right? And I got the whole racial aspect. I get what they were concerned about, even though, they explore that topic. But, and they even touched a little upon, like, aren't they going too fast? But they never really talk about at all, like, the age gap, which is I found interesting. So
yeah, I think the age gap might also have been not as big a deal because he had previously been married before and, had a wife and son that were killed. So he's a widower, and I don't know if that might have lessened it. Whereas if he had never been married or something, that might have drawn even more red flags. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just pointed out because I was just curious how it was not highlighted as a detriment when the family was really focused on that. The whole movie, you're like, oh, the challenges you're gonna face, and that's literally not one.
That's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not talk about it. I thought that was a interesting omission. But anyway, so obviously, that backdrop occurs, and then we kind of get the plot kind of moves to the introduction of characters. So like the housemaid who's basically
I like her.
Yeah, who basically raised the daughter, because obviously you know how this works with like two parents who are busy with the world. They're always at home, and that was kind of implied that even though Joey's mom was like supportive and loving, it was kind of like subtle, like it was like kind of like implicit that like she wasn't like the home take care. She wasn't like the
mom,
the housewife. Yeah.
Well, no, she was the art gallery curator.
Yeah, and like she had somebody else help a lot with the everyday
raising. I mean, she was like the mom, I'm sure, that Joey.
Yeah,
the nanny was.
Yeah, and so
honestly, that just reminded me a little bit of that episode of Atlanta where you had the little kid raised by the Trinidadian nanny.
Yeah, and it's Tilly. That was the character's name. Tilly.
Yeah.
But I want to bring her up because she has strong opinions in the beginning. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that topic of dynamic when she meets John. And she gives him her opinion on this dynamic. I thought that was one of the early, like, wow, this movie's going to be good.
Look, my whole thing is I think she had probably seen a lot of discrimination in her day. And, civil rights was just in its infancy at that point. And I think she was worried that, relationships like that would stir the pot. And she also wasn't sure of what. I think it was twofold. She was coming from the experience of being a Black woman back in the 60s. Probably haven't seen quite a lot. All right. And having dealt with quite a lot. And two, I think she's very protective of Joey. Right. Because she kind of raised her as well. So I think twofold is I think she just saw that dynamic as just gonna bring nothing but trouble and problems.
Yeah, and I think because I'm from the modern era, like it was interesting seeing somebody who is also would identify culturally with John. This is not like to
an extent. I think there's also, and what gets forgotten is the sort of class and education difference there.
Yeah, I meant more of like if you look at some modern dynamics, is like we have immigrants that more recently came from like Coleman Hughes talks about this, right? They came more recently in the 90s and stuff from the parts of Africa and like immigrated.
Or the Caribbean.
And they have a different cultural touchdowns. I mean, at least with like even though, like you said, they might have different upbringings, because John looks like his parents have really invested to make sure he could be a doctor, and she was, more.
Dude, he was like a world-renowned doctor doing like humanitarian work in Africa.
And I want to touch upon that in a sec, but she obviously probably identified more with his parents, actually, because they probably came from more of
I agree.
thing. But my point also was just like more of like cultural
which is kind of
touchstones. Like
I would say that's why Tilly and the dad had more of the similar response.
Yeah. The on the topic of John having this great resume, when I was watching this again, it occurred to me that like it was, I don't know if those their intent, but they almost had to build them up so that I think to your point,
it's more acceptable.
I think to what you said earlier about making it extreme, they build them up so like you couldn't have another out, right?
Yeah.
Oh, like behind the veil of racism, you're saying, oh, he's a
he's not good enough from
the career. You could have gone with blah blah blah, but he checked every box that they would have considered except for the race box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was part of the plot dynamic, but I do think that it sends a certain message that I think still hasn't changed over time, is that if you are, an outsider, you need to have an impeccable resume. Sure. And I think that's like could be dangerous. So I'm curious of your thoughts on that, like in general, like building up somebody, it's just because they have to be perfect in almost everything else before like they could be considered, and even then there's still a debate. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that surprised. I mean, look, like half of your dad's side of the family is Asian, right? And there's a big stereotype, and we both grew up in a city, San Jose, that has a significant population of which is Asian, right? And a lot of families that we both know, right, they expected their kids to either be like doctors or engineers, and on top of that, they expected them to marry people who are similar like that. So it's not that surprising, because I think in many different cultures, you just want your kids to sort of marry, quote unquote, what you think is at their sort of socioeconomic level, right? And I think by and large, people tend to do that.
Yeah, I think there's that. I think it's a well-studied self-selection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel for like the young viewer who like watches. I don't know they're watching this movie, but if they were to watch this movie,
probably not.
Yeah, and they want to maybe like break out of like their current socioeconomic class. That like if they want to marry somebody of like, let's say, a different socioeconomic class, they have to almost like level up to a degree that like. I mean, like you said, his resume, even when I was rewatching this, I was like, wow, it's actually more impressive the second time that I've seen it. Like he's helping the world.
And he was like former assistant professor at like Yale Medical School. It's like, whoa, okay.
like what's going on?
I was like, what? It was more like, what hasn't he done?
Yeah, exactly. Even the priest was like, he's famous. Died when he said that.
You're like, do you know who this is? He's very important.
But we still need to talk about race, dude. That's the best part.
Yeah. Well, I like the Monsignor. He made me laugh.
That was so funny, dude. Yeah, he was a funny guy. He was there for all the comedic relief.
Well, he also just wanted this in typical fashion for like he was clearly an immigrant of some sort. Like the immigrant Catholics just love the gossip.
Yeah, and also like that free dinner.
Are we having wine? Yes. Do you not want this? No, I'll take some scotch as well.
So good, dude. But yeah, it's so. Yeah, so I guess we're discussing because we've seen the film, but like this film.
Did you like his one-on-one talks with the dad? By the way.
Yeah, those are funny.
Oh yeah, piercing, a couple of them.
Especially the fake liberal one, like.
Well, yeah, but then even when they're like upstairs before dinner, and he's telling, he's like, I don't think you have a problem with John or your wife or your daughter. I think more what you don't like is that you've been put in a position where you don't like what you see about yourself. And he's like, then the dad got pissed because he knew it was true.
I know, dude. But my favorite line in that sequence was like, I would tackle you if I could. I was dying, dude. I was like, this old guy's gonna try to tackle him. But that is true. I'm a big believer in that quote of like pressure reveals. So like he was under pressure and his character was revealed in the end.
Well, he had some skin in the game finally, and like he found out that his personal life clashed with what his quote unquote belief system was.
Exactly, which happens a lot, I think, with a lot of these idealists.
No.
But rewinding back before we get to that I think the most important stretch in the movie, just little things I wanted to bring up is I guess they set her up this way, but Joy does come across as very naive, super idealistic. I think. And I don't know the time. I mean, I know the 60s because I studied it in school, but like I didn't live it, right? So like part of me wondered if like her character also was supposed to represent this idealism what America could be in the future.
Probably.
Because you gotta remember that this period in time, there's a lot of change in America, right? Like there's a lot of change culturally. There's a lot of tension with the Vietnam War and
all the non-protests. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. And I wonder if she was supposed. Because I also liked how they played across the generation stuff. And you see this with John when his parents a lot, which is fascinating. Like, their generation has a certain outlook because of what they went through in the 50s and 40s. And like, and obviously this, the 60s is a very, I mean, I'm pretty sure I forgot what year actually that happened. Hold up. Sorry. Hold up.
What?
What
year? What happened?
No, it hadn't happened yet. Okay, that's why I want to look it up. So 67, it hasn't happened yet because MLK was
assassinated. MLK assassinated?
Yeah,
68,
yeah. He was the year after, right?
You should have asked me. Yeah, I would.
Yeah, and so this is still a year that like he's still alive.
Yeah. Well, that's why even when Tilly asked, "Oh, guess who's coming to dinner?" The great Reverend Martin Luther King. She even says that in the movie. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was so funny. Yeah, because she's finding it crazy how because
how unbelievable this is.
Yeah, like all these people are coming for dinner, dude. Because like her character, like obviously she's a critical plot point, but like how she, seems to like have no reservations about like not just her marriage, but like, oh, I can go to Africa with him. Oh, I could do this. I can meet the parents. It shouldn't be an issue. Like she's just full blown, like, I guess in many ways what I think Hollywood or the writers or maybe people who were fighting for that in that era, in the protests and the, let's say like, that's the ideal.
Idealized optimism.
Exactly. So I'm just curious, like, what did you think of her character and like how she comported herself without the film? And do you think that's on point or not?
I mean, that's so hard to say, man. I didn't live through that point in time. I think you're probably right in that. At least with the younger generation, that's why they were trying to espouse, and there was that giant counterculture movement that was starting to, take root across America within that generation, right? Today's baby boomers were all, even though they were more conservative at that point, they were all free love and whatnot during that point in time. So yeah, I think her character really was just representative of that kind of idea with the youth. Yeah, I don't know what more you want me to say. Personally, to me, I didn't grow up in that era. I just thought she was naively foolish. But I'm like a mid-millennial, right? So we saw the Iraq War, the financial crash. Our like experience is totally different.
Hey, you gotta have those ideals, dude. You gotta have those ideals. I still have them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're probably more far gone than I am.
I have ideals, but they're on the dark side. The dark side ideals,
Anyway.
Ideals on that side too.
Anyway, yeah, we don't need to go down that road. Yeah, but anyway, so it's hard to say. I think you're right though. She was representative of that generation.
Yeah, I was actually going to go further. I was thinking also she represents in many ways, I think the America that, like an America that we could be in some ways. But it didn't. I don't think it happened the way they hoped. Anyways, we don't have to get into that.
Hold on. Before we go, I'm just going to have a slight side tangent. So as I brought up kind of like our perspective as millennials. What's funny is the other day, this is a total side tangent. We'll get right back to the film.
Oh, okay.
But the other day I was watching the movie American Sniper with some friends. And one of our friends, girlfriend, she's much younger. She's like in her early 20s. And, we're watching this film, American Sniper, and this is all about like the Iraq War and that kind of time period. And she just, at one point during the film, she just asked, she's like, "Can I ask a question?" She's like, "I know this might come off as a really stupid, but I just got to ask, why were we in Iraq?" And I was just like, that is a really good question. And I'm not being like sarcastic. I was like, a lot of people were asking that and don't really know why we were in Iraq. I was like, at that point in time, that's what everybody was asking. But anyway, sorry. So
I could have answered it for her, but I'm gonna go back to the film. I know why we're in Iraq.
I know, but I was like, that's a really good question. I'm not being sarcastic.
Yeah, it's called. You should have just told her one thing. You should have been like, look up Halliburton. Yeah, look up Halliburton. You'll have to figure it out, dude. Basically, if you ever want to know why a war is happening, look who's getting rich.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, sorry, total side tangent. But that question just made me laugh.
But that is true.
She felt like she's like, I know I might sound really dumb with this. I was like, honestly, you don't sound dumb. That's literally what you were asking was exactly what everyone else was asking 20 years ago.
Yeah,
but
she
anyway.
was born probably like 2000. So
she's born around the time when we went in.
Yeah, my sister has the same thing where like she misses some of these cultural touchstones because she kind of knows about it, but she doesn't. Even though we're a pretty active political household, so like she is probably more well versed in a lot of her.
But you cracked me up when you asked your little brother, who's much younger. You're like, oh yeah, do you know who who did 9/11? He's I'll never forget when you said that. He said ISIS. And you're like,
I was like, are you kidding me, dude? Like that's not. Like not the right answer, dude. Yeah, I was just
anyway. So let's circle back to the film. I'm sorry about that.
Anyway, but that's okay. Yeah, it's but yes, but I mean, we'll get into it because there's some scenes in this film around generational differences, which I think are important to touch upon. But I just wanted to highlight her character because she's obviously a central character, and also
Tillich, yeah. Absolutely.
Joey as well.
Joey. I'm sorry. Yeah, we talked about both of them. No, I mean, honestly, they're all essential characters in their own right.
Well, except for the guy that brings the meat. Anyways,
Okay, yeah, and by the way, that dancing, I was like, what was that?
That's the 60s, yeah.
I was like, these people have like no rhythm. I was like, man, they needed 10 years into the future when they brought hip hop and brought some rhythm back.
Yeah, it was a different time. Yeah, I was just like, okay, like that's cool, whatever.
Anyway.
Let's see. I guess I'm trying to remember when the priest comes in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the priest. Basically, his whole point was trying to point out, there's a great hypocrisy with the dad in terms of his ideals and really what he and when they clash with what is happening with his own daughter and his own family. Right, that was the whole point, and to try to point out, you're right, those are coming into conflict now, and how he thought he felt might not necessarily be how he really feels.
Yeah, I guess
that was a big point of the hypocrisy.
Yeah, I guess instead of speaking of plot points, I just think that let's just finish with the themes. I think there's two things we have to get to explore, which is the generational gap between the couple and the parents, and then obviously the topic of interracial marriage. But so let's go with the generational topic. And the scene I like is the John and his dad, right? Like, the dad is really top down,
you can't do that. Come from a different era. You got to marry someone who's black.
Yeah, right? and he tells him that.
I see him channeling his inner Dr. Umar there. I don't know if you know who Dr. Umar is or not.
It sounds familiar because he probably sent me a clip, but
Dr. Umar would not approve of this film. You're looking him up right now?
Yeah, I'm looking him up. Okay.
Dude, he's so into the cultural fray right now. Basically, he's all about, peace and love, my Pan-African brothers. Don't he kind of the lingo he speaks is like, don't fall for the trap of these snow bunnies. he's like, always look out and always be with your Nubian queens.
I mean,
Like it's very kind of like, you know, Afrocentric, which
yeah.
I mean, I get it's kind of sticking with your culture and trying to propagate that. But he's basically like of the most extreme version. But the way he phrases some things is just hilarious.
That's funny.
I don't know if you were reading about him, but anyway, sorry, I was making a joke.
I was reading about him, but like I gotta read it later about him. But that is
you
funny.
probably will. You're gonna watch some clips and just die of laughter. But so, anyway,
but yeah,
I mean, so like I understand where the dad's coming from because he was like a mailman through the 30s, right, in Los Angeles. I mean, during that time in LA, a lot of people probably don't know. You know, they had a pretty active KKK fraction in certain neighborhoods in Los Angeles, right? So it was not the safest. It was not the most welcoming. There's a lot of discrimination towards not just Black people, but Mexicans, right, in the Los Angeles area. So I can understand where his feelings are coming from, that, you know, this will be very difficult and problematic. And it's already tough enough being Black in America. Why do you want to make your life and your kids' lives even that much more difficult?
Yeah.
And, you know, how John responds is like, you know, he's like, you know, you got to let me live my life. And he's like, I get it. And he's like, with your experience and how you are, you see yourself as Black. And he's like, but his kind of striking line, although probably at that point in time was a bit naive, he's like, you see yourself as someone who's Black. I see myself as just a man.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that was a clear difference in thought. And that's kind of where the clash ended up really being like coming to light. I would say within that line.
Super naive, but yeah, sorry, I've seen too many films, and I've been on the circumstances of the other side. Like, no, that's super naive. You can't break it. Like,
yeah, but I think I was also trying to like you were saying, I think that was trying to show the optimism that was in the air amongst like the youth at that point.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that like you said, the father, not only did he grow up in a different, harder era, but like I'm like 99% sure that the Watts riots in LA already happened. That 65, it already happened. So like
64, 65.
What I appreciate about this film is that like
it was smack dab in the middle and the heart of all of that tension.
But they don't make these references. They make subtle because like the topics they discuss, but like. So that's timeless enough. So that's not too tight. Like you got to read about every little event. But if you kind of know some of the events, you kind of know like this movie is it's made in a very particular touchstone moment, you know, and it's and all the topics are really relevant, especially for that time in the household. Not like the bigger political, because they're not talking about democracy and like Congress. They're talking about like the issues of the home, which I think is what most Americans think when they go to they interact with politics. That's what they think about. They don't. They're not thinking about like, we control this oil field or we control this trade route. They're just like, this is affecting my everyday life now. Yeah. So yeah, I think I thought that was interesting. And also, you do see it also with Joey's character as well with her parents, but like, it's not to the same degree, I think, as like John, his father. I think that dynamic was very interesting, and I think it's something that's an archetype you see still of like. You're thinking of your time, but like times are different now, and I actually see this a lot with, especially in I think the African American community. I had an old coworker that he had a very like intense, because he cares about his kids. So his kids are mixed, and they obviously great students. They played. This is when I was still working in not in New York, different state.
Jersey.
Yeah, and there was and this is before obviously the new of the current era with George Floyd and stuff, but they're at a basketball game, and I think it got kind of heated. Like it was really competitive, and it got really heated. He wasn't there. My coworker, he worked so much that he wasn't there at the game, but it got heated, and I guess the cops showed up, and they didn't arrest his kid. They arrested another kid. But his son was like livid, like what the heck, like why are you arresting only him? And then like started like like not like physically, but like yelling at the cop. He was
upset.
Yeah, and he was like telling us, so like like I get it, like I know he was in the right what he said, but like I told him like you can't act that way. You don't know what could happen. The next moment that you could just be
on the ground.
Shot. Yeah. Or arrested yourself. And like, he's like, that's not how I grew up. I was told, like, you know, you're on pulled over. You say, yes, sir. No, sir. You put your hands on 10 and 2. And I was just like, damn, dude, that's what I was taught to. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I will say there's always that sort of like racial aspect. Like I don't know if you looked at Roland Fryer's work, who's a Harvard economist. I was actually watching an interview with him recently. And he did a big study looking at police data from 10 different cities, I think in like 2016. And basically what his key result was they found, I think, minorities are more likely, about 25% more likely to get roughed up in terms of typical encounters when they've done nothing wrong, as opposed to like, adjusted, normalized for everything, as opposed to non-minorities. And so that's your point, right? That, you just got to be careful. You always want to be on your best behavior so that, you don't have any cause for concern, because you don't know how quickly an interaction can turn south. And even as I've never quite felt that way, but I am aware, and I think it's partly just being a dude as well. When you get pulled over by a cop, you want to make sure not to have any sudden movements, because even as a dude, there might be a perceived threat level just being a guy. Whereas you hear, this might be a little messed up, but you hear interactions of females getting pulled over, and I know a couple who've literally been able to cry their way out of a speeding ticket. It's just like that's something you just can't do as a guy. Like, you don't get that level of sympathy.
That's not we don't get that sexism point, dude. But yeah, I've been lucky where I've never been roughed up, but I have been like pulled over, and like I guess he did catch me technically speeding. But like I just remember this incident because like the one thing I always share this story with people, like one thing that stuck out to me is that, okay, fine, to give me a ticket, write me up, but asking me like, what am I doing here? And like, oh, I really work here? Like, okay, dude, like, wow, dude. Like that's just,
I mean, there is bias. I mean, like, that paper proved there was bias in terms of interactions. Yeah. Not that it's from every cop, but like on average, you looked at a large data set, and they did find that in their analysis.
And yeah, and like I and me, I was like, I have my ID badge to get to the building right here. I could show you. I didn't want to pull it out because I don't know what's gonna happen, but I said I could show you. And then he was then he was just like, okay, fine. Like, but I was just like, you're really trying to like test it here. And I was just like, I don't think you would ask. I was convinced you wouldn't have asked a white person that. So
you're saying you wouldn't ask me that, which probably not.
Yeah, so I was just like, give me a break, dude. But I don't have that much respect for Jersey cops after that incident. So yeah, they're corrupt anyways. I know they're corrupt. So I had a coworker, a different coworker. He has family that were NJ cops, and he was just like, yeah, dude, like these are people that are like he's married into. I think it's like through his relatives. He's like, I wouldn't even trust them. And I was like, damn. So says a lot, man. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. I mean, there's in that greater Jersey NYPD area, there's been a lot of corruption cases over the years. Exactly. I will just say that.
And then for the layman, just watch Sopranos. Then. There you go. A lot of people on the book.
Yeah, I mean, there was I think a Brooklyn detective who like illegally framed something like 30 people or something like insane. Like levels of not even incompetence, just straight up, corruption and contempt for the law. So yeah, you always get that.
All right, so okay, so we talked about some critical scenes and some funny stuff. I guess this ties in with the interracials, right? So the movie ends with the dad giving, or the what's his name, Matt, right, Mr. Drayton, right, Drayton or Dayton. Drayton, yeah. Giving a speech about like the whole, like it's funny how his speech is like a summary of like I was put in a really tough circumstance.
It was just a recap. It was basically like an end of the movie recap.
I know, that's what I like about it. And then this important scene that happened where like what did you think of that scene actually? Because he references it that
which one?
When John's mom, I can't remember her name, basically says to that your men when they get too old they forget the passion of, and the passion and like she took him to town, like he basically become like a sexless human, dude. I was just like, dang, dude.
She tore him to shreds, but that was the key point. Yeah, I mean, she even like they made the point that and I mean, that it is a key point. It's like you can't really, life's complicated and you can't choose who you fall in love with. Sometimes it's just circumstance. You can't just plan that out, right? And you're just they obviously do love each other and they're caught in that moment.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the women get caught up in the romanticization of that. And then the dudes are more on the logical path with like, yeah, we get that, but everything else about this is just not practical, right?
Yeah.
Your time frame, all of that. And that was kind of the clash. And then I think he realized he's like, I've been looking at this too logically and not necessarily from the emotional standpoint. That was the whole point.
Yeah, and in the end, his message is like
I did love, by the way, and I got to bring that back. I did love what the priest said though, which was a fire scene like at the beginning when he was saying because like the mom wasn't sure if the priest was going to side with her or the dad wasn't thought that the priest was going to side with him, and he's like, no, he's like, I don't see a problem. He's like, I've known many an interracial couple, and he's like, come to think of it, they tend to do very well from a marriage standpoint. And he's like, it might be because they have to go through so much from adversity that it brings the best out of them. And he's like, I'm not entirely sure. He's like, but in my experience, he's like, he's like that dynamic, whatever it may be, tends to bring out the best in them. And I was like, oh, that was a fire line, and like it rattled the dad quite a bit.
Yeah, it did.
From that, and I was like, dang, that was some good writing right there.
Yeah, but this line was still the hypocrite, like, your
values.
Yeah.
No. I honestly, the priest had some of the best lines in this movie, though.
Yeah, but
Mr.
The Monsignor, so Mr. Drayton also, I think he basically ends the speech with like he does give his support, but he highlights that their opinion shouldn't matter.
Yeah,
because
which is just not practical, by the way.
Mr. Practical, as an idealist, I was like, let's go, young couple,
Bro, yeah. Anyway. I know too many people and families who, they weigh so much of the significance on what the family thinks. I'm sure you do too.
I mean, this goes into the international thing that like I feel like now it's not so blatant because people are more careful. But like I've gotten the speech of like, oh,
no,
you should consider like how our culture could integrate with them. And I was like, so you're basically saying I should just
yeah. I mean, I mean, in a lot of this, right? This tends to focus on the difference between white and black people. I bring it back to a lot of Asian cultures. And we've known some that they've had interracial dating, but they're specifically Chinese side of the family just basically did away with that, basically saying, if you don't marry someone within our culture, we're not going to accept them into our family. Known a couple like that. And so like it gets difficult because a lot of it is just it's a lot of other cultures not wanting to keep their family kind of culturally homogenous.
Yeah, it's surprisingly still more common with many cultures.
Very common. Yeah.
And
I mean, you've seen I've told you about the show Indian Matchmaking, even, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've both known quite a few people of Indian descent. I think the statistic still holds true. Last time I checked, and this was a few years ago, that I think Indians, out of all immigrant groups, are the least likely to marry outside of their own ethnic group. And even within that, they tend to want to marry people from wherever their families are regionally within India, right? Because there's a big difference there if you're Gujarati or Punjabi, right?
Yeah.
They tend to want to marry people who are within their own regions of India. So,
it's still holds true. No, I mean, I don't have the data. I trust that you've seen the data, but anecdotally, that's all I've seen is that
exactly.
It's like a precursor. Like, it's they're the most classist. It's the most classist dating I've seen ever. Like, they consider race. I just remember when I was hearing stories of like initial first dates.
Have you seen basically
the
like
checklist?
What have you seen with this the Indian Matchmaking, the show? It's on Netflix for anyone who wants to watch it. It's crazy. They go through something when they're like looking at potential partners. They request what's called their biodata. The biodata is basically a summary of like, how tall are they? What's their weight? Where's their family from? what's their educational background and what they do and how much they make. It's like just a breakdown. It's like just take everything else away and just give me like the raw numbers. And I was like,
Yeah.
that is the craziest thing. And I don't think, especially for dating practice here in America, we will never jump straight.
It's a different subculture because like they still do some things that are Americanized, like they still do like those dinner dates and stuff, but it's like and like they'll do like Top Golf, but like seriously they'll ask like how many years do we have to date before I get the proposal, and like it's all like planned out, so it's like you have like what your family does this, like our family does that. Like,
like to them, dating and marriage is more done for the family, whereas here I think it's in reverse. More so.
I think the American ethos is like our individualistic nature, and like
whereas it's more societal.
Yeah, it's like, can you integrate with my family? Can our families integrate? Yeah, so I think it's yeah.
And I think to a degree you need a combination of both.
I think that's fair. I think the issue with the characters in this film is that, like you said, like they have a lot. What they don't realize is that they have a lot going for them. So they have both characters, like even John's family, like they seem like they come from at least some solid middle class background.
Well,
he's highly educated.
His dad's retired on a probably pretty good pension plan. We know how much the city of Los Angeles pays out for pension plans.
Yes. And then like Joanne, she comes from basically our version of aristocrat in the Bay, in the Bay.
You saw that house. How much do you think that house is going for in SF?
Today, probably like 20 million.
15, yeah.
Back then, 1 million, which was a lot.
I don't even know if it was 1 million back then.
Maybe 100,000.
Probably like 200,000-300,000 is my guess.
Yeah, when he was paying for the ice cream and he gave her like cents, I was like, okay, that was nice back then.
4 or 5 cents.
Yeah, I was like, that's like $5 now. I was like, oh, here you go. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, he could just give her change. I wish I could do that. Yeah. But like they have a lot going for them in the sense of like it's not like I think explicit, but like I said, they have the I think some social economic backing.
They have a lot of money.
Yeah, and the education matters because I was thinking like you changed the storyline.
She didn't grow up poor.
Yeah,
like, you see how many hats she was trying to bring with her to Geneva, and the fact that you're like, oh, we could just go to Geneva tonight, huh? Back then.
Yeah, exactly. Like versus like, let's say they had changed the storyline to, let's say her family was like steel mill workers and like his
blue collar from Ohio. Yeah.
And his family was like, even not even a mailman, maybe a non-union job. Maybe it was like something else,
How did David Sachs put them? Lunch pail Democrats.
Okay, yeah. Lunch pail carrying.
Oh, sorry.
Anyways,
sorry.
But yes, that's what he said. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh, but yeah, like they have some stuff going for them even in this era because, like you said, like it's money helps, but I think also like having certain educational background and certain status symbols. Like he has a lot of the status symbols, right? His resume speaks for itself. So that like will help them in their journey versus like, if they have other detriments, which could, like you said, could be, different family dynamics. But yeah, I think on the topic of like, this is the last topic, I guess, before we give our final thoughts, of let's call it interracial marriages. Oh yeah, I was gonna say this about before I forget the Indian subculture, and your point about you need a mix of individuality and mixing into the family. I do agree on that point. One thing I do find kind of like non-American, and I know they're American, but I view America as a spiritual essence of an ideal, but is that like when you do that, you exclude, I think, the possibilities, like new possibilities of like different dynamic.
I see what you're saying. I totally agree with you.
And in my opinion, and I've never shared this directly with them because it's, this could cause issues with my friendships, is that like I think that's un-American. I think America is all about possibility. Even if it fails in the end, I think it's,
So part of what I never understood with a lot of ethnic groups that have come to the U.S., right, and they kind of want to maintain their cultural identity, is like if you really felt that, like, I never understood this because I knew several Greek people, and they were always insistent that their kids marry Greeks, right? And this is in like South San Jose, and I'm like, bro, there's like almost no Greek people here. There's like they have a small little community, but your pool is so small, it makes no sense, right? And it's like, if you really felt that way, why did you take your kids away from your home country where they're all Greek, right? If that was so important to you, like, some of this stuff just doesn't make practical sense. Like, you could watch the movie called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's the same idea, and the whole movie, like, she marries someone outside. But I always found this weird. It's like same thing if you're like Indian, you want them to marry Indians, Latinos. It's like, well, why did you come to this country? Like, you're coming to a place that's very culturally and ethnically, diverse relative to your home countries, and taking them away. Like, obviously they're going to interact and probably fall in love and relate to people who might not necessarily be totally from your background. So then why the heck would you do that, or like be shocked and upset like that? Anyway, sorry. Disconnect always like annoyed me.
I think it's because like the unknown is scary. Like I said, like, just because you're open to new possibilities doesn't mean they succeed, right? But that's what I mean. Like, in my opinion, in my version of what I consider what America is, because I know sometimes I've been told even abroad that I'm not American, which is insulting. But the is that
Europe, bud?
Yeah, basically, racist continent. Anyways, is that like America?
By the way, that also always cracks me up that people like. You heard this a lot when Trump got elected, right? Was people talking about moving to other countries, and right, I was the biggest fan of him, but I was like, we were talking about, oh my gosh, like I should move to Europe or Canada. I was like, but they have issues too. Like, what are you talking about? There's no perfect country. Yeah. Like, what do you guys are insane.
Yeah, exactly. And just to tie it to the characters of this film, like, as much as I did find John and Joanne naive, a part of me felt when I finished watching the movie that in many ways they represented what America hopes always it can be, and we see this obviously when our political discourse ramps up in the election cycles. But I don't know, even though I do find it naive, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm a bit jaded after all these decades. I still like believe that America
we can aspire to.
Yeah, America is at its best when it aspires to be that, versus some podcasts I listen to that are a bit they need a reality check, but whatever. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
But yeah, if there's nothing else that you want to discuss, I think it's good to get into final thoughts. And
no, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, the movie's not complicated, right? I mean, they just have some interesting topics that they bring about, and really what it was trying to show was, some of the complications within like dating at that point, and trying to break certain cultural norms that were and societal norms that were held in place at that time, and really trying to show some of the hypocrisy amongst liberals, progressives back then. Something that really Malcolm X talked about quite a bit, right? In terms of like, always be wary of the white liberals, right? He had a famous speech where he's like, they may say that they support you in one ear, but in reality they mean something completely different, which was kind of the case with the father of Joey. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It was an interesting movie to kind of look at and watch. Yeah. Do you want me to give final thoughts, final ratings? I don't know what you want to do.
I was gonna say your score. Yeah, you get a great analysis, a great summary. I was like, wait, where's your score? You should just inject.
Sorry. Yeah, so I thought the acting was very good. Obviously, these are some pretty big names for this era, especially I can never pronounce his last name, but Sidney Poitier. I've seen his name, Pontier. Sorry, I apologize. And Spencer Tracy. Those are two names, as well as Katharine Hepburn. Those are like names I've come across. I haven't seen a lot of their discography, but they definitely acted very well in this film. It was cool seeing San Francisco, so there's a little bit of, I guess, Homer bias, because, right, we grew up and we were like, oh yeah, like we know these areas that they were kind of showcasing and showing in this film. I'm trying to think of any criticisms. I don't really have any criticism of this film. It felt a little slow at times, right? But I think that was just more of a stylistic difference. Especially like when I told you at the beginning, it's like, you see the father, right, when he's before he makes his final speech, he's in the background kind of contemplating what John's mother said to him, and there's like he's kind of looking into the distance in music background. It's like, okay, yeah, like obviously like we don't film scenes like that in most movies today, so it was definitely like a different era. So it's hard to, it's not my cup of tea, but it's hard to criticize it because that's just how movies were made back then. But for the content, the acting, I think I got to give this film a 9 out of 10.
Fair score. Yeah, as somebody who is a product of an interracial coupling, this movie was very interesting.
Watch, Chris is going to give 6 out of 10.
No, not 6. We'll get there. Yeah, I thought the acting was great. I confer with all the points. I like the seriousness. I like how they balance serious and funny. That's a rarity in films. You're either like too funny or you're too serious and like these are the wrong time to land these jokes. But I thought they balanced it, like you said, to the writer's credit.
I was laughing quite a bit in this movie.
Yeah, and then at the same time, you're like, this is still serious though. So it's like this is when like you hit that perfect. It's rare. You hit the perfect like balance. Yeah, I will say that like for a film that's talking about the challenges of the couple is gonna make. I still think a gaping hole is the age difference. I mean, even in that era, I imagine I could have still been relevant. I think as well as I think there's just some random scenes where I don't think we benefit, like the random dancing. Like I don't really know what the benefit of that was.
Yeah, but that was so quick, so I won't really knock it.
And there's probably others as well that I'm like, okay, like
I think really what they were trying to show with that was the contrast, because you see Tilly, who's of a different generation, in the doorway there, and then you see the youth dancing around, kind of free love, man.
Yeah, and I guess like there was that bigoted like art gallery employee that has a scene, but like that could have been cut out. I don't know if that. Really
that wasn't super necessary.
That added to, me, I'm a big on like efficiency in films. So the slowness pace, I think I got used to it because I knew that it was like the film was more like a play than it was a traditional. And also, like you said, the style back then is different. Also, I like Stalker, so I mean, pace for me is like I have a different threshold.
Glacial.
Glacial, riveting, dude. I mean, I saw the
Stalker,
world.
The pacing you can't say was riveting. That was glacial.
Yeah, but you let your mind relax and you process, that
was about the pace of you sitting in the sensory deprivation tank.
that it actually was the pace of that, dude. Actually, would have been the perfect movie to watch as you're in there. Yeah, you might have actually with the movie and that you might have actually transcended to like angel level. But yes, like I think this movie, is good. I do question how many, like, this is not a movie that I think you can rewatch it, but I think it like, luckily I've had a big enough time gap, but I can see if this is a movie you rewatch every year, it's going to lose its kind of like luster in a way.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm not too big on rewatchability, but I think just something to call out. Yeah.
I think for this film, that's not necessarily where.
Yeah. My score for this film is a solid 8 out of 10. This is like, that's high for me, as you know. So I mean, I'm known for like some low scores for some movies that people love.
Yeah. For those of you just watching this for the first time, Chris, his person he relates to the most on YouTube is Anthony Fantano, the Needle Drop. He aspires for the scores that he gives. Always like insanely harsh.
No, it's gotta be fair and balanced. Dude.
Do you know who that is, Chris? Is it Anthony Fantano's a dude who gives like album reviews?
No, that I wouldn't know.
You probably like him. Like he gives like in-depth analysis, and he's like, "Yeah, so I really love this. Like it's like a transcendent album. like I haven't heard anything this beautiful. I'm giving this like a high 5 to low 6. Something like
That's good. I think I've seen this face though on YouTube, but no, I haven't.
I'm
not
sure
followed his
you
stuff.
have. He's like very memed.
Yeah, I've not seen him though. That's funny though. That is funny.
Yeah, he always. So he doesn't give traditional like 8 out of 10. No, he's like I'd give this album like a low to mid 6, or like what else would he say? He's like high 6, low 7. Like that's his like rating. It's like on the border.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to be, you have to be really think about it. I mean, all I know is that in the history of this pod, only one host has had to rescore a movie because he regretted the score he gave.
I regret it so much. Honestly, no, that's not true. You've said you looked back and thought, and you're like, there were like 2 where you like, really? Like I gave that score? You're like, dang, I don't know what I was thinking in the moment.
Yeah, but that was because I was too harsh. Usually, probably.
Yeah.
I lean on
One
too
that was
harsh.
not harsh enough. I will agree with you.
Yeah, that's true. But anyways, yeah, this movie is definitely highly recommended, especially like if you don't watch a lot of 60s films, or your audience or yourself could, use like maybe challenging, because I still know people that, they would probably take a lot of different interpretations of this film,
Sure.
And they would be like, yeah, this is a no-go. Like, I don't know what this is so fake. And, why are they even doing this? This is dumb, because you could have that other perspective. Like you said, this is too naive and stuff, but I think you do have to take the film for its contextual cultural context. Like it's in a very hyper political, hyper everything time period, right? For, American history. So,
Absolutely.
So yeah, with that, we conclude episode 70. Wow, it's a lot of episodes. We're getting up there. We're becoming a film gurus, cultural icons. Hopefully,
we're in the niche.
Definitely in the niche. Even though our niche is good, we have those films somehow pop off. Yeah. But yeah, please like and subscribe, and obviously, if you have any thoughts or films that are in the niche we're overlooking, let us know, and we'll get to them.